Well, our brain hasn't evolved in 150,000 years.
Right.
We have caveman brains with caveman solutions, which are usually run, fight, faint, or freeze. And none of those things are going to help us in economic crisis or a pandemic or lockdown.
2020 was an incredible year. It didn't just bring the coronavirus to our doorsteps. In many ways, it stole our sense of safety. Many found themselves swept up with the fears of the virus running rampant and losing their jobs. Today, we are speaking with Georgia Dow, a licensed psychotherapist who knows all too well about dealing with mental health issues cropping up from difficulties in one's life. If you'd like to speak with Georgia about your particular situation, especially due to the pandemic, links to her website and her YouTube channel will be included in the description. Now, let's talk to Georgia about the impact of the pandemic. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Your name is Georgia Dow, and you're a psychotherapist, a writer, a speaker, a host on shows such as This Week in Tech, so TWIT, and you hold degrees in education, psychology, masters in creative arts therapy, and you also are an expert in dealing with disorders like anxiety and depression.
So my specific field of expertise is in anxiety and depression disorders. So that deals with, having panic attacks, just having generalized anxiety. That means that your anxiety system does not go back to normal. Anxiety attacks means that you spike to a very high level of anxiety, but then you kind of come back down. Obsessive compulsive disorders, health anxiety, social anxiety, the fear of judgment, performance anxiety, different types of things that are in that realm, along with feelings of depression, dysthymia, seasonal affective disorder, economic anxiety. There's a lot of things that are coming to the forefront because in the end, anxiety and often depression, and that's why I kind of deal with both fields, it's that feeling of a loss of control. Things that come out of nowhere that you would have never expected make our system kind of go haywire of how do I get back control? And certain personality types are more towards wanting to have control, wanting to problem solve, thinking too much, worrying too hard on themselves. And other personality types are not. And so depending also upon who you are as a person, the pandemic may have affected you worse, or for some people have actually felt less anxiety because they might have more of a fear of missing out, a fear of achieving enough. And the pandemic has kind of slowed down the entire world. And so a lot of people are going back to their roots and living simpler and feeling more comfortable because of that. And so everyone's really affected differently. I'll say most people, their stress levels have increased, though generalized across populations.
So my wife and I, we were, so she was working and I got let go in 2020, I thought. Let me just take a couple of months off. Even though I didn't have a issue with making rent and paying for bills and things like that, what I noticed was like something inside me started saying, hey, maybe you're not part of this group of people who are quote experts in this field. Maybe the past 14 years you've been doing this hasn't really been, it's been something, it's just this, I think they call it imposter syndrome or something.
Syndrome, yeah.
And I just like, what am I thinking, and then once that creeps in, it's just like, okay, this is an illogical thought. But then it's still there, so it's still making you feel the way it makes you feel. So it was kind of a interesting time where I had to say, okay, I need to put my my belief of who I am and how my ability in what I've done so far, and I need to construct a resume that looks appealing, and I need to go out there and do it. And I did those things, and my results were positive. But I just wonder how many people sort of don't interject and say, hey, this is not a logical way to think. And hey, I do have the expertise. I'm not an imposter, and I can do this stuff. And they don't, and they sort of sit in this this dip, right, where they're just kind of feeling a certain way. Have you seen an increase in people coming to you for help in 2020 about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I've seen it. Well, I've seen an increase, period, in people that come in. I think that for a lot of people, that feeling of self-identity. So if you already are hard on yourself, if you're already very critical, if you hold yourself to a high standard, and then for some reason, because of, the pandemic or because of any other unforeseen reason that you couldn't have planned for,
Yeah.
a lot of people feel like they failed because of that. They should have known. And there's no way that we could have planned for this. This hasn't
Right.
happened in 100 years.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people are more leaning towards the type A personality, and they feel like, but I should have thought of everything beforehand. And so it must be a failure to me. And then start questioning their own identity.
Right.
Who am I? Am I as good as I think that I was? Maybe I was lying to myself. Maybe, I just slipped through the cracks and no one recognized that I shouldn't be having this, or I'm not worthy of this.
Yeah.
And so we often have to go through of, what are the words that you say to yourself, and what is your identity? And do you notice the positives that you do, or are you constantly dismissing yourself? If you don't take a compliment really well, if you're really hard on yourself, and when you make a mistake, you're very negative, if you beat yourself down, if you're spending all night spinning and thinking and problem solving, this may be you.
Yeah.
And because of that, when times are tough, we beat ourselves up even harder because of that. And it causes a lot of anxiety, and it can cause depression as well, especially if you were lucky in that you found your way out of this.
Yeah.
But what happens if you don't, or it takes longer than you expect it to?
Yeah.
That can make people go into a feeling of learned helplessness, as I'm just going to curl up in a ball and I want to wake up when this is over. But the problem is that we don't know when it's over. And that's another piece, is that so for our brain, the middle part of our brain is our protection system. It's our limbic system. It's the part we used to call the lizard part of our brain. It's primal. And the thinking part of the brain, where we do all of our analytics and we do our math and we can problem solve, grew over it. So these two parts of your brain talk to each other.
Got it.
And when that part is in distress, if the parent part of your brain, the thinking part, is giving it, you know what, you're horrible and you are useless and this is going to be horrible and we're not going to find our way out, then that increases that anxiety cup of, if there's danger and I'm not going to be able to figure my way out, then let's send adrenaline into the system and cortisol to be able to fight our way out or run our way out.
This is very
The thing is
physical.
that these problems don't like, well, our brain hasn't evolved in 150,000 years.
Right.
We have caveman brains with caveman solutions, which are usually run, fight, faint, or freeze.
Yeah.
And none of those things are going to help us in economic crisis or a pandemic or lockdown.
Yep.
But that's what we go into. And so we end up with this anxiety that's curdling inside of us. But it's because it's the only tool we have for an issue that can't use that tool. It's not going to be solved with it.
Got it. Is it a flight response or a fight response? What type of a response are we talking about here?
It really depends on you. And depends on the issue. So you might have a freeze response to one type of stimulus, and to some other stimulus you won't. We all have a different response, and a different response depending on what the trauma is or the fear is.
Got it.
So I have some types of things that I might freeze for and other things that I might attack for. So even you might usually avoid things, but in this one case, you get angry. Angry is the fight, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times anger, it's the same system.
Yep.
Fight or flight.
Yep.
And so some people might get very frustrated and yell and they're unpleasant, and other people may avoid and kind of curl up in a ball and just want to go to sleep.
I've been doing this for long enough so when I do recognize myself being in a weird state, in a couple of days, I'm just like, okay, I need to change. And then I figure out a way to change, I'll read I'll listen to an audiobook that always kind of gets me up and running. I'll listen to music, go do some physical exercise, write things down in terms of the goals that I want to achieve, and start just trying to feel smaller wins where I can. And actually, it's going to sound weird, but actually literally say things out loud, which are like, hey, this isn't true. This is true.
I don't think that's weird at all. If I can just step in, I think that's great. Like, coaching to yourself is wonderful. So you should do that and do that more and not feel apologetic or shy about that. I talk to myself all the time and try to be that positive voice. So continue. Sorry.
Awesome. No, but these are the kind of tools that you sort of figure out. You have to develop these tools to cope with the ups and downs of life, right? Ups and downs of your businesses, of your investments.
Exactly. And it's okay. And it's okay not to be okay.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with you. It's not a weakness. And let's be honest, the people that will go through anxiety are actually usually the movers and shakers, the ones that are more type A, driven, hard on themselves. They're the ones that are at risk for burnout.
Right.
So really, if you have anxiety, you're probably actually much more adaptive in an actual crisis than the more type B, laid back, chill, I'm going to sit on the couch and finish this and nothing really shakes me. But they're not going to be the first ones to act when the house alarm goes off. They may finish the pizza and then act afterwards. Your anxiety is actually training you for the emergencies. You're constantly problem solving. You're constantly thinking of the what ifs. You're constantly thinking about these scenarios, which our body experiences anxiety, but it's like an emergency broadcast test system. It's testing out the anxiety for in case of an emergency. So when the emergency happens, you're already primed and ready. Boom, I've done this 1,000 times already. I got it. And you'll feel this immense sense of calm and serenity because it's a danger that you have set yourself up and you do. The problem happens is when it's an unknown, it's something outside of your control, or it's anticipatory anxiety. So you can't actually do anything about it yet.
Yeah, it's in the future.
Exactly. So you think through problem solving, but because it hasn't enacted, you're just spinning your wheels. And that's a horrible feeling. Type A personalities are more, I'm going to problem solve it, I'll fix it, and I'm going to do it. But what if you can't? Now you spin.
There's a control aspect to this thing. I guess this differs from the personality who wants to control versus who can just let go.
Exactly. And you want to have both for both personality traits, and they're old school personality traits that are not used. It just works so perfectly with anxiety that I still use them. That the B traits you want to grab some motivation, achievement oriented traits. And the A wants to get a few of, I have to just practice letting it go, let the chips fall where they may. I don't have to control everything. The world will not crumble if I let go of this. And that's a hard thing because one is most type A's believe that the world will crumble without them doing it. And two, they usually are pretty good at what they do and know that. So to let someone else do it and they're not going to do it as well can cause some anxiety also.
Gotcha. There's a mental framework or a picture that I sort of think about when my mind is running into like 50 different things, and it's lightning. When lightning figures things out, it's kind of like this, right? It kind of goes like in bunch of branches, all fractal, right? And then all of a sudden, one finger strikes the surface and the entire thing discharged from there. So I see the brain as something similar where all these thoughts are running, and then that thing that does happen is the thing that you decide, and that is the intention, and then you make that happen through action, and everything else disappears, and now you've moved on to the future, and now you've got more lightning.
I like that. It's actually kind of similar to the way the brain actually works, because you end up with all of these blind little dendrites and axons. They're like reaching out to touch each other, but they're blind. So they want to make a connection with the other side, but they don't know where it is.
Dendrites?
They're the little arms of an axon. And I'm not a neuropsychologist, so all the neuropsychologists, you can put your comments in at the bottom and be like, my sister-in-law is a neuropsychologist, and whenever I say that neurons die, she's like, they don't, they prune themselves. And I'm like, oh, I don't think anyone would know the difference, but okay, I'll try to be more accurate. But they reach out their little arms to touch each other. And when they do, that's learning. That connects. And when neurons fire together, they wire together. And so whatever you're doing, that's that thing where you finally get something, they've made a connection, and it becomes this string to a rope bridge to a superhighway.
Got it.
And that's the difference. So it's similar to your lightning theory. It's actually quite accurate to the way the brain really does work.
Ooh, nice.
And you can look at some videos. It's hilarious to watch them like just stretching out blindly. And then when they touch, see, again, I'm going to make them seem more human than they are, but they seem excited. Yes.
I saw one clip I think a day ago, and I thought that's got to be like fake.
No, it's that adorable. And then they touch each, and they're like, you can just see them like, yes, we
Wait, is that real time?
Not real time, no.
Oh.
I think it's like 0.03 millimeters a day of growth, which is, for the brain, it's monumental.
Okay.
But we learn, if you're practicing every day, you can grow your brain in an area. And whatever you are doing at any moment, you are programming your brain to be better at it.
Ah, okay.
So if you are practicing being anxious,
Oh
you
my
are
God.
going to get better at it. So be careful
Amazing.
what you practice because you will improve your skill level,
Perfected.
and you don't want to be a master at anxiety.
I've had things that I was thinking too much about. Any event where I could have done something different. And then I literally saw a YouTuber say, hey, to stop ruminating, stop ruminating. And to do and to do that is
Well
just
said.
to realize that it already happened. It couldn't have happened any other way. It's just it is what it is. It's in the past.
At this point, it's just part of your life.
Yes, exactly. And remember that regret lives in the past, anxiety lives in the future, and we live in the right now, and neither of the other two exist. Once you give yourself permission to not have to go through all these cycling thoughts, you can let go of them. And I like to say that usually a thought will ruminate or cycle through because we feel regret or we're upset or we're worried. As long as you say, I've learned the lesson to that, and if I could do it over, I would do this for the next time,
Yeah.
then at least there was a nugget of learning that happened, a little valuable piece that you take from that. Because usually when it's something that bothers us, it's because it didn't work out the way that we wanted to.
Gotcha.
Rarely is something bothering us that we handled perfectly.
This was part 1 of the mental health impact of the pandemic. Next, we'll discuss the financial and the mental impact that the pandemic had on stock market traders.